Coming to the next topic, we have the issue of illegal rat hole mining. Now, we have this rat hole mining, which is primarily practiced in the states of Northeast India. And this is an illegal practice, a very crude form of mining, which is labor intensive, which do not involve any kind of scientific interventions. And most of the people who are involved in this, they're very poor people, right? In one of the case, which has recently happened in Meghalaya, almost 25 people have died. They have been killed because of a blast which occurred in a rat hole mine. Now, and many people have also been badly injured. Now, what you'll have to understand is that this practice was already declared illegal in the year 2014 by the National Green Tribunal. And this was upheld by the Honorable Supreme Court in 2019. Supreme Court said that under the Mines and Minerals Development Regulation Act of 1957, we declare this particular practice as illegal. We upheld the decision which was taken by the National Green Tribunal. But according to some people over there itself in Meghalaya, what they say is that there is rampant illegal coal mining continues in many parts of Meghalaya despite the NGT ban, and numerous fatal incidents in remote areas go unreported. So there is also a nexus. There is a nexus with respect to the people, the powerful people in the local areas who are still operating these mines and involving these poor people. And there is a kind of a compulsion which poor people have because they don't have other options. We'll see what are the reasons. And therefore, in many of the cases, they succumb because since these mines are not operated in scientific way, many times what we observe is that there is a collapse and many people die. Or there is the intrusion of water, there's flooding which takes place, right? So this is a very serious public safety issue, part of GS2 and disaster management also. What is rat hole mining? It's a very primitive, crude, labor-intensive and hazardous form of coal mining, primarily practiced in the Northeast India, in the states of Assam and Meghalaya, right? So this is what you can understand. A primitive coal extraction method involving the narrow tunnels of 3 to 4 feet height, suitable only for one person to crawl into. So the person, if he or she seizes any of the danger inside, the person does not even have adequate space to come out. That is what the issue with the rat hole mining is all about. Involves digging of very small tunnels, and it is typically practiced in Northeast India. Now, what are the different ways of extraction in the rat hole mining? There are primarily two ways of extraction. The very first is the side cutting. Now, it takes place once the tunnels are developed along the hill slopes, right? Second is the box cutting, where you have the vertical shafts of almost 100 to 400 feet, and then you have the horizontal passages. Just imagine. And they are very narrow. They don't have enough space, right? They don't have enough areas over there. What are the reasons for rat hole mining, especially in these parts, in the Northeast? See, over there is poverty. There is indigence. And people do not have the productive livelihood opportunities. If people would have productive livelihood opportunities, alternative opportunities, why would they involve themselves in such risky professions, in such hazardous professions? So there is lack of employment opportunities in these areas, right? And once you have the local leaders who are involved in these practice, once they offer, that if you would, take out the coal from these areas, we would give you this much amount of money. So there is a lure of money which is there, right? Financial gain, the immediate financial gain from selling the extracted coals. Moreover, in these states, for example, especially Meghalaya, there are a lot of reserves of coal. There are coal seams, right? You can just see Meghalaya, East Jantia Hills, West Khasi Hills. The state has almost 640 million tons of coal reserves. And that is what makes the local people to involve themselves in this as a lucrative task, right? Then we have the land ownership issues. You must understand that we have most of the people living in these areas as tribals. So the land titles are not clear. And there is a kind of a tribal ownership which is there. So you have the local leaders of the tribals who basically employ different ways and means and therefore involve the more poor people in this particular practice. Ambiguities in land titles and lack of regulation. Then coal demand. Coal is something which is in continuous demand, right? So therefore, there is a continuous involvement of people in this particular illegal rat hole mine. Continuous demand for coal sustains the practice. Now, what are the challenges associated with the rat hole mining? The very first is the safety hazards. Since the passages are very narrow, they are prone to collapse. Since you are not employing any structural foundations, you're not involving any kind of pillar, they are highly prone to collapse. Moreover, what happens is once you dig too much deep into these mines, there is the inflow or there is the ingress of water. Water tends to creep in. And once water comes in, you have, in many cases, you also have the flooding which takes place. And many people, they basically get drowned under at such depths. So that is what you'll have to understand. They're prone to collapses, trapping the miners, and there is poor ventilation. And sometimes what happens is that in these mines, you have the sudden release of methane, CH4. And this is, then the combustion takes place. And all of a sudden you have a blast. And in this particular case also, it is the blast which has taken the life of so many people, right? Suffocation, lack of safety measures, frequent accidents, injuries, and life-threatening diseases. For example, in 2024, in Vokha, in Nagaland, almost 6 people died in a collapse. Then we had in 2018, in San, in Meghalaya, more than 25 people died because of the intrusion of water. And they drowned. They were drowned because of the water, which intruded in these mines. Then we have the environmental impact. The rat hole mining contributes to the deforestation, soil erosion, and water contamination. Why? Because we have this particular phenomena known as the acid mine drainage. You have sulfur, right? Once the coal is extracted, you also have the release of sulfur. And sulfur, once it gets mixed with the water, it increases the acidity of the water. So the water loses its quality. And once people consume that, definitely it has ill effects on the health also. High sulfur in the coal leads to acid water in the rivers. Also, once the water is used, the same water is used for the irrigation, then it also degrades the soil quality, right? Improper waste disposal, acidic runoff degrades the water quality and harms the biodiversity. In Meghalaya, we have the acid mine drainage, and also, for example, in Lukha River, right? So the water in the Lukha River has become acidic. Also in Nagaland, in Vokha and Mon districts, the soil has become very poor because of the discharge of the acidic water in the fields, right? Through the irrigation. Then we have the social issues, exploitation of child labor. Yes, according to a research by the NGO Impulse, almost 70,000 child labor. This is constitutionally prohibited, right? We have Article 24. But still we have the employment of a lot of children under the age of 14 in these mines. Next thing which you'll have to understand is that we have a lot of the immigrants, people from Nepal. And in this particular case also, we have many people from Nepal who have been killed. So people from Bangladesh, from Nepal, they also come over here. They are basically lured by these local leaders that if you would work, we'll give you this much amount of money. So that is also an issue, right? You can just see mines operating without leases, environment clearances or regulatory oversights, legal ambiguity under the 6th schedule, and laws have exploited the bypass. We'll see what are the issues with respect to that. 26,000 abandoned rat hole mine openings are still not closed. So anyone can even fall in that particular mine, right? So even if you have a children going by, so that children can fall into these mines because these are not covered, these are not protected. Banned by the National Green Tribunals, there are safety risks, environmental damage, and legal issues, right? Then let's talk about what is a regulatory framework. The regulations in India, first of all, it is illegal, was banned by the NGT in 2014, and the overall jurisdiction comes within the state government and the district administration. The Supreme Court of India in July 2019 upheld the ban, and the Supreme Court very categorically said that it is illegal under the Mines and Minerals Development and Regulation Act of 1957. The regulation of rat hole mining in Nagaland. Now, why, especially in these states, it is a serious issue and it is a rampant issue, even though it has been declared illegal. Why it is in continuation? You'll have to understand. Once we talk about Meghalaya, now Meghalaya, you know, it's a part of 6th schedule, right? Assam, Meghalaya, Tripura, Mizoram, these 4 states. Now they have the autonomous district councils or the regional councils if multiple tribal groups are there. And they have a complete control over the land, over the resources. So once you have the central oversight, and on the other hand, you have these ADCs and RCs exercising their own power. So there is a conflict. And once there's a conflict, what ultimately happens is that we have these cases of rat hole mining, which are done in a very secretive manner. And in many cases, ultimately, you have these kind of blasts which take place, and then it comes to the fore. It comes to the open that yes, a rat hole mine was being operated over there. Similarly, we have Nagaland, for example, we have Article 371A. 371A gives the tribals of Nagaland a complete control over their resources, over their land. So we have the tribal groups over there who give the local leases in the form of SPDLs. And there are strict conditions which are imposed, but still they are misused. And then the rat hole mining takes place in these areas. Sixth schedule. Through ADCs complicating the mining. Local tribal communities own both land and minerals, limiting the oversight and enforcement of the central government or even the state government. ADC's authority to legislate, it conflicts with the central regulations under the MMDR Act of 1957, and therefore there are regulatory ambiguities. Though there are the central regulations in place, but since you have the autonomy which is provided to these areas under 6th schedule or 371A, which deals with Nagaland, so you have these cases which are in continuation. International context, there is no specific international law which directly addresses the rat hole mining. But again, this is clearly described as unsustainable practice in many of the international norms. So what we'll have to understand is that what is really needed is adequate implementation. Though you have the regulatory framework or the legal framework, but that is not being implemented rightly. And because of that, also the poverty of the people is being exploited. And once you exploit the poverty of the people, you basically lure them with money. You say that we would give you the immediate financial gains. And therefore, they are in a way forced to join these professions and join these hazardous mines and work over there, right? So again, this is a very important, a very critical public safety issue. Let's have a means practice question. Rat hole mining continues in parts of India despite judicial prohibitions. Discuss the challenges associated with the rat hole mining and the regulatory framework governing such mining practices in India. 10 marker question, 150 words. Do write an answer to this question. Let's go to the prelims pointers section.